All right, I'm back from spring break and ready to dive into episode 4 of Paddle of the Week. My family and I spent time in Mexico, enjoying the heat, soaking up the sun, and of course, playing a ton of pickleball. Our Airbnb had a private court, which is pretty cool, and I also found some pretty competitive games across town. Naturally, I packed way too many paddles, including the Proton Flamingo, Thrive Smoke, Gearbox GX2, and both Joola Pro Perseus IV, 14mm and 16mm, and a few more. So plenty of playtime and plenty of new impressions to share. Here's how this series works. You ask me about paddles, or a paddle company sends them over, and I try to work them into my rotation. Look, I need to be interested in a paddle to dedicate time to it. So if you're interested in it, then that goes a long way too. Some weeks it's easy. Paddle news is slow and I can really dial in. Other weeks it's more chaotic. I've got more paddles than I can realistically test in depth. And that's where this series comes into play. Paddle of the Week is my chance to share quick insights, first impressions, and some performance highlights about a bunch of new paddles. Then, as I get more time with them, I'll hone in and drop deeper reviews on the ones that really stand out. So if there's a paddle you're curious about, or one you think I'm overlooking, drop it in the comments. This series is just as much about answering your questions as it is about sharing my learning experiences and my process. Before we dive in, a quick nod to this episode's sponsor, Bodhi Pickleball. If you're battling sweaty hands or just looking to upgrade your grip game, Bodhi's dry tack overgrips are excellent. They're not as tacky as their standard overgrips, but they still have tack without feeling sticky or chalky, and they actually get grippier when wet. Plus, they've got a killer lineup of colors to match your style. And if you're into fine-tuning your setup, Bodhi's got tungsten tape, speed caps, and much more to help you dial in. Check them all out at bodhipickleball.com and use my code MPV to save some cash and support this channel. All right, let's get into it and talk paddles. First up and back again is the Standout Pickleball CF4. If you've been following along, you know this paddle has been one of the most consistent in my recent playtesting. It strikes a good balance between power, control, and stability, making it feel versatile without leaning too far in one direction. The pop off the face is quick and responsive, but not overwhelming. It can be an unpredictable kind of pop. What you put in might be what you get out. The power profile is springier than, say, the Franklin C45. The surface feel is right in the middle, not stiff, not soft, about a 3.1 on a scale of 1 to 5. It gives just enough feedback to stay connected to shots, but isn't overly plush. One thing I've appreciated is that the power profile hasn't changed over multiple weeks of play. That consistency is a good sign for long-term performance. What I felt in week 1 is still holding true now. The paddle hasn't gotten any hotter. The CF4 features a 16mm core and spin is solid at 2,227 RPM, which lands it just inside the top third of paddles in my database. It's not elite level spin, but definitely enough to shape shots and add variety. You won't be thinking, gosh, I wish it had more spin. The balance feels even, not head heavy, not head light, which makes it easy to maneuver while still holding up well on blocks and counters. Price-wise, it retails at $220 US, but you can save 10% with my code MPV. Personally, I think it's a good paddle, but $220 feels a bit steep when there are other options out there. For example, the 11624 power paddles offer similar performance and quality for less money. And if you're looking in this price range, I'd also recommend considering the Franklin C45 as well. If you want more details on how this paddle has performed over the past few weeks, check out the previous episodes of Paddle of the Week. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. It's been a fun paddle to play, but whether it's the right fit for you will depend on what you're looking for. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. All right, moving on. Next, let's talk about the Rev Pickleball Zeus, now that I put some more time into it. This 14mm power paddle continues to offer exactly what I noticed in the first session. Consistent, controlled power with a solid, dense, and stable feel. It features a T700 raw carbon fiber face and a Gen 3 thermoform design, including edge foam injected walls that reduce vibrations and enhance power. The power profile hasn't evolved at all, which is a good thing. Sometimes with thermoformed or foam-enhanced paddles, the core can soften or change over time, but the Zeus has stayed true to how it played from day one. That's a good sign for long-term durability. The power delivery is straightforward. It's not bouncy, springy, or unpredictable. The response is predictable. What you put in is what you get out. Swing fast and hard, and you'll get a solid speed in return. But it doesn't have that extra trampoline effect some power paddles bring. That makes it feel more predictable, especially if you prefer paddles that don't play too hot off the face. The feel is dense and sharp on contact, sharper than something like the Standout CF4 or Franklin C45. It feels quick in hand with a low swing weight that makes it easy to maneuver. Serve speed is solid and punch volleys feel sharp and snappy in fast exchanges. But if I have one criticism, it's the slightly tighter sweet spot. I'm not saying it's small, I'm just saying it's a bit tighter. Off-center hits don't get punished badly, but they don't feel great either. You have to be precise to get the most out of it, like any paddle, which can be challenging if you're not fully dialed in. This one isn't going to absorb slightly mishit shots, and you may also need to dial the paddle in with some additional weight. It retails for $149, which I think is priced right for what it offers. Solid, consistent power without any surprises. And you can grab it for even less using my code MPB to save some cash and support this channel. I think the value is more than there for what you get in this paddle. If you're after a balanced, power-leaning paddle that feels traditional, no gimmicks, no surprises, the Zeus is worth a look. It's a no-nonsense option that plays fast, feels crisp, and so far it's playing just as it did on day one. All right, next up is the Pickleball Apes Pulse X. And this paddle has been an interesting one to dial in. It's a 16mm thermoform paddle with a Kevlar and nylon face. And while the power profile has opened up slightly, maybe around 5% since I first played it, it still leans more control than it does power to me. The feel is soft but not mushy, and it's got this plush, consistent response that reminds me a bit of how the Tecnifibre paddles play. More on those later. It's very controlled, plush, and super easy to play with and reset with. The static weight is 7.9 ounces, and the balance point comes in at 24.3 centimeters, which gives the paddle a feel that leans slightly head heavy, but not extreme, but just enough to add some plow through on drives. The swing weight is up there at 121.05, so it's on the heavier side, which helps with power but can slightly slow your hand speed. The twist weight is 6.3, offering decent stability for most shots, though it's not the most forgiving on mishits. Overall, it feels stable and plush, but with just enough head weight to give it some driving force on aggressive shots. Power-wise, it's good, but measured. On serves, my average speeds clocked in at 55.6 miles per hour, just a touch above the average in my database, and punch volleys averaged 36.2 miles per hour, landing right in the middle of the pack. The pop is there when you go after it, but it's not going to surprise you with unexpected bounce. Spin is good at 2,167 RPM, enough to shape shots and keep drives dipping, though it's not going to rival top spin paddles. Would it be noticeable? Probably not. Where the Pulse X shines is in the soft game. Resets, drops, and dinks feel consistent and controlled, and it's easy to absorb pace without popping the ball up. The plush feel gives it that slightly muted response, but not in a way that feels dead or disconnected, just smooth and consistent. It's one of those paddles that rewards control and precision, but still offers enough power to stay dangerous. I'd still classify this as an all-court paddle, maybe slightly leaning control. It's not going to overpower anyone, but it gives you confidence to slow the game down and reset under pressure. And the power it does have feels predictable and easy to manage. Speaking of power, the paddle hasn't opened up like my Pulse V or S, with the S being my favorite of the Pulse series shape. It retails for $199, but you can save 10% with my code MPB. For that price, it's fair for an all-court paddle that feels this smooth and controllable. If the power opens up more over time, the paddle increases in capability, but even now, it's a strong option for players who value control with good driving force. If you like paddles that feel plush, smooth, and controlled, the Pulse X or the entire Pulse lineup is one to keep an eye on. All right, moving on. Next up is the Pro Series Fuego 14mm by Element 6 Pickleball. This is a power-focused 14mm paddle that delivers a strong, punchy feel. It reminds me of the Rev Pickleball Zeus in terms of how it feels on contact. Dense, solid, and impactful. I would even say that I get some Thrive smoke vibes from it, just a bit. It definitely packs a punch for a 14mm paddle, especially on drives and punch volleys. The static weight is 8.05 ounces, which gives it a solid, sturdy feel without being overly heavy. The swing weight is 122.2. That's almost at the 90th percentile, which means it has great plow through on drives, but also makes it feel a bit heavier to swing. A swing weight that high is well outside of my comfort zone, and it would be great if paddle companies could target elongated shapes around 117 swing weight, in my opinion. Anyway, it favors players who like to swing with intent and generate their own power, but for me, it's a little too much to swing comfortably all day. For comparison, the swing weight on my Joola Perseus Pro IV 14mm came in around 114. And that difference in swing weight is highly noticeable for an elongated paddle, especially in fast hands battles or just longer sessions. The Fuego hits hard, but it still takes more effort to stay quick. The twist weight is 6.3 in the 33rd percentile, so it's decently stable but not ultra forgiving on mishits. The balance point feels neutral, not overly head heavy or head light, but with that high swing weight, it still feels like it carries momentum through your shots. I also have not experimented with weight. That said, this is not a beginner-friendly paddle. It's going to suit an intermediate plus player who's already confident in controlling pace and managing resets. If you're prone to popping the ball up with your current paddle, the Fuego will probably make that worse. The paddle retails for $169, which is competitive, but at that price point, you're now in the same range as some other well-received paddles from brands like 11624, Bread and Butter, and Course Pickleball. That's something to consider if you're weighing value and overall playability. I don't have a full take on this paddle yet, especially since there's limited information about how it was designed. I've reached out to the founder with some questions, and I'll share some more information with you once I learn more about the design process and intent behind this build. For now, it feels like a solid, punchy paddle with a good power profile for a 14mm build. But whether it's the right fit for you will come down to how much swing weight you're comfortable with and how you like to generate power on the court. All right, moving on. Next up is the UnMARKeD Pickleball UnMARKeD. This is a Gen 2 thermoformed paddle with a CFC surface, a layered mix of carbon fiber, fiberglass, and carbon fiber. That is growing on me. The middle fiberglass layer adds just a bit of pop to an otherwise controlled feel, while the 16mm core and wider 10mm cell diameter help reduce weight and add dwell time. I do also get Thrive smoke vibes from the UnMARKeD paddle, probably because they both share a 10mm cell core. The elongated shape, 16.5 inches by 7.5 inches wide, offers good court coverage while still feeling manageable in hand. Early on, I did experiment with adding weight, but I've since been playing it stock, and it's held up better than I've expected. The paddle's power profile is moderate. It's not going to overwhelm opponents, but there's enough punch for counters and putaways. Full swings generate solid pace, but it doesn't have that trampoline-like bounce you'd expect from power-heavy paddles. The feel is softer and plush with good dwell time that makes it easier to control the ball and add shape to shots. Despite that softness, it's also springy enough to push energy back into the ball. It doesn't play stiff, but it's not super plush either, just somewhere in the middle. If the UnMARKeD were a 14mm paddle like the Element 6 Fuego, I think they'd feel closely related. In terms of swing, the static weight is 8.07 ounces and the swing weight is 117.99. It's quick in hand, but not ultra fast, with enough heft for solid plow through. The twist weight is 6.57, which adds stability for most shots, though it's not the most ultra forgiving paddle on miss hits. The balance point is at 24.4 centimeters, giving it just a slight head-heavy feel, but it's still easy to maneuver. The sweet spot is surprisingly forgiving for an elongated shape, which makes it easier to connect with shots consistently. It's not super poppy, so it won't amplify pop-ups, but it also won't hide them. If you're confident with resets and touch shots, it feels predictable and easy to play with. But if you struggle with control, this isn't the paddle that's going to fix that. The UnMARKeD is going to retail for $159.99, but you can save with my code MPB. So it really comes down to what feel and performance you're chasing. Final thoughts? It's an all-court paddle with a slight control lean, and I do mean slight. Nothing flashy, but it's consistent and easy to settle into once you adjust. I'll keep it in my rotation for now just to see if it holds up over time or if that power profile evolves. Next up are the Gearbox GX2 Elongated and Integra XL. The GX2 series is a bit of a shift for Gearbox. These are Gen 3 thermoform paddles built with a 3K woven carbon fiber face and a unique SST 2.0 carbon fiber rib core. That's a mouthful. That core is different, no honeycomb, no foam, just carbon fiber ribs designed for better energy transfer, more durability, and a stable feel. I've been testing two models, the Elongated and the Integra XL, which is its hybrid shape. Both paddles have a plush, dense feel. They absorb vibration extremely well without feeling dead or hollow. It's not an ultra soft feel, but it's solid and muted with a controlled response. They don't feel sharp or rigid like some carbon paddles, just connected and stable. The power is sneaky. On paper, the GX2s don't scream power paddles, but when you swing through a ball, there's a nice, consistent energy transfer. They sit at the higher end of the all-court leaning power range. Not explosive, but they deliver when you commit to the shot. That said, pop isn't extreme. Punch volleys, flicks, and fast hands exchanges aren't going to feel super lively. You'll need to rely more on swing speed than paddle pop to win those battles. The Elongated GX2 has a swing weight of 121.8 and a twist weight of 5.85. The balance point is 24.7 centimeters, which gives it a slightly head-heavy feel. It has strong plow-through, but isn't the quickest in hand. The Integra XL has a lower swing weight of 114.25 and a twist weight of 5.8. The balance point is 25 centimeters, which gives it a similar feel, though it moves much quicker in hand. Both paddles have a static weight of 8 ounces, so they don't feel overly heavy, but that swing weight is where you're going to feel the difference. Spin has been solid. The Elongated pulled 2,204 RPM and the Integra hit 2,194 RPM, both right around the top half of my database. The 3K woven carbon face grabs the ball well, giving enough bite to shape shots and add some variety. The sweet spot is generous compared to other Gen 2 paddles, and mishits aren't going to be as punishing as they would on some other paddles. But in stock form, the GX2s feel clean and stable, even on off-center shots. One thing I really like is the handle. It's 4 inches in circumference, which is slimmer than most paddles on the market. I prefer that size because it gives me more control over grip pressure. And if you want a thicker grip, you can always build it up with some overgrips. I think more companies should do this. In terms of price, well, that's the million-dollar question. We don't know what these are going to cost yet because Gearbox hasn't told us. But when they do launch, you can use my code MPB to save 10% or more. This isn't the first Gearbox paddle with an edge guard, but it still turns heads. It does break from that classic Gearbox shape, but not feel. And if this is the direction that Gearbox is taking with control and power, I'm totally on board. The GX2 paddles feel refined. They're controlled, dense, and stable, but without feeling dead. They offer solid all-court power with a consistent, reliable release. Not explosive, but there's definitely something there. That's likely thanks to the SST 2.0 carbon rib core, which replaces the traditional honeycomb with carbon ribs running through the core of the paddle. The sweet spot isn't massive, but it's generous, and I'm even considering adding weight to expand it, but even in stock form, the paddle feels distinct. It's a unique blend of control and punch that doesn't feel like anything else I've played. I don't know what the price point of the GX2s is going to be, and that could influence my recommendation. But in terms of playability and just fun playing these GX2s, I highly recommend checking them out, especially if you're on that edge of an all court and you want something that has a bit of punch when needed. Next up is the Gearbox Pro Ultimate 14mm. This is one of Gearbox's newest releases, an edgeless thermoformed paddle built around their patented SST 2.0 carbon rib core. This core isn't just about strength, it's about refining how a paddle performs by maximizing power, control, and stability. Unlike foam or honeycomb paddles that degrade over time, this core is designed to maintain consistent performance without breaking down. Now let's talk about swing weight. It's 127, right at the top end of my database. And honestly, it's just too high for me. It feels heavy, and during longer sessions, it gets uncomfortable. My hands slow down, and there's zero room for customization. If I added even 3 or 4 grams of weight to the sides to expand the sweet spot, I'd be pushing the swing weight well over 130. That's just too much for me, especially since I like to keep things fast in hand. The static weight is 8.07 ounces, and the bounce point is 26.1 centimeters, which adds to the head-heavy feel. The plow through, though, is undeniable when you swing through. You can feel the force. But by the end of the session, it's like swinging a sledgehammer. Okay, not that extreme. Twist weight is where it struggles the most. It comes in at 5.75, which is low, and that's where the sweet spot feels tight. Mishits are going to feel less stable, and while I'd love to add weight to help with that, the high swing weight makes that a no-go. But here's the thing. Power is where the paddle thrives. Serves collecting at 57.6 miles per hour in the 96th percentile, and punch volleys hit 36.3 miles per hour in the 53rd percentile. It delivers strong power without needing to overswing, and the dense, plush core gives you a satisfying, solid feel on contact. The pop isn't crazy, but the power is easy to tap into. Spin came in at 2,200 RPM, which is solid, not top tier, but enough to add bite and shape shots effectively. The dwell time feels good and gives you just enough hold to control those dipping shots. In terms of feel, it's classic Gearbox, plush, dense, and stable, but not hollow or stiff like some older PPE models. It feels refined and controlled, and the SST core offers consistent energy transfer. Off the face, the ball also feels like the previous paddles we just talked about, the GX2, although it does not have as much power. Now, breaking in, let's just say none of these Gearbox paddles have evolved in power, not one bit yet. They play the same today as they did the first swing, and I'm not sure that'll change, but we'll see. I know others have slightly. Gearbox explained that their ribbed carbon core is designed for durability and consistent power over time. And so far, that's what I'm getting. So if you're banking on it breaking in and opening up, only time will tell. But so far, mine haven't moved at all. The Pro Ultimate Power 14mm retails for $274, and you can't use my code on this paddle. But if you want to help me out and support this channel, you can use a special link or scan the QR code on the screen. But this is a premium paddle at a premium price. Whether it's worth it really comes down to how you feel about the swing weight and the sweet spot. Final thoughts, it's a strong power paddle with a clean, plush feel and good spin. But the swing weight is a limiting factor if you're sensitive to heavy setups. For me, it's too heavy for long sessions, and the low twist weight makes it tough to dial in consistency. But if you can handle the weight, this is a solid, powerful option that has so far stayed consistent in power output. Okay, moving on. Next up is the 11624 Vapor Power 16mm. This is my favorite shape in all of 11624's lineups, and especially the power lineup because it offers the best balance of power, control, and feel to me. It's a hybrid-shaped 16mm paddle designed for players who want power without sacrificing too much control. The static weight is 8.29 ounces, swing weight is 116.3, and twist weight is 7.2. Bounce point is 23.6 centimeters, so it feels evenly balanced, not head heavy or head light. Serve speeds averaged 56.4 miles per hour, punch volleys hit 38 miles per hour, and spin came in at 2,366 RPM, one of the highest in my paddle database. In terms of feel, the Vapor Power is plush in a good dwell time kind of way, but also very responsive. It's got a softer feel that some power paddles like the Joola 3S, which is a bit dense, but it still delivers quick pop when you speed up. There's a satisfying crack on contact, but it doesn't feel jumpy or hard to manage. The fiberglass layer helps with that, giving a bit of punch while still letting the ball stay on the face just long enough for control. It's a paddle that feels easy to connect with. Mishits aren't as punishing thanks to that higher twist weight, and the sweet spot feels very generous for a hybrid shape. What I liked most about the paddle, whether I'm resetting, driving, or flicking at the net, it just responds well without needing a ton of adjustment or having a steep learning curve. The balance is a big part of that. It feels fast in hand, but also stable and maybe a bit head light. It's controlled, but still powerful and aggressive when you need it. On soft shots, it feels a bit jumpy, and on attacks, it has enough pop to win hands battles without overshooting. I tested it with weight customization, adding tungsten to the sides to try and expand the sweet spot, but honestly, it just felt better in stock form. The balance and feel are already dialed in, and adding weight slowed it down too much. At $169 or less with my code MPB, it's one of the best values in the power paddle category. If you're looking for a paddle that delivers consistent power, great spin, and solid stability without being overly jumpy or too tough to control, and also one that holds up well over time, the Vapor Power is a strong option. While I did add a bit of tungsten, about 1.5 inches, just to improve controllability, it's just a great paddle that is really ready to play right out of the box. Okay, next up is the Joola Pro Perseus IV, a 2-for-1. And this paddle's been an interesting ride. The 16mm version was my paddle of the week recently, but after more time with the 14mm, it's starting to edge its way in as my go-to. The 14mm is just faster in hand. Its 114.9 swing weight makes it super easy to maneuver, especially in fast hands battles. It's got that immediate pop. You don't need to take a full swing to generate speed. It's just a quick flick and the ball's moving. It feels aggressive, but not out of control. And while it started off feeling a little sharp, the surface of the 14mm has softened up over time. Now it's got this deeper, thuddier sound, almost like the 16mm, and it feels like there's more dwell time. The ball sinks in just a little more, making resets and softer touches feel more connected. Spin is another highlight. The 14mm is hitting 2,193 RPM, which edges out the 16mm's 2,067 RPM. That extra spin makes it easy to roll shots or cut angles, and it's been a fun addition to my game. The 16mm though still holds its ground. It's softer, smoother, and feels a bit more predictable on power output. The 116.5 swing weight gives it more plow through, but it feels just a little slower in hand. The sweet spot is slightly bigger and mishits feel more forgiving. If I'm slowing down the game and working on resets, it's a good option. But lately, I've been leaning towards the 14mm. It just makes me feel like I can attack more, especially when I'm holding the line. The ball seems to sit up just right for me to flick or speed up, and that extra hand speed makes a big difference. It's not harsh either. The foam in the shoulders really absorbs vibration, so even mishits feel clean. Neither paddle has really evolved in power profile. They play how they played from day one. And the 14mm has settled into that perfect balance of control, pop, and hand speed that's been working for me. It's just fun to play with right now. Both paddles retail for $279 in the premium category. But if you're thinking about grabbing one, you can use the link in my bio or scan the QR code on the screen. That'll help support my channel and keeps me testing and reviewing and bringing content like this to you guys. To be super clear, you really can't go wrong with either of these paddles if you can stomach the price and not get a discount. If you like faster hands, sharper spin, and quicker pop, go with the 14mm. If you prefer more power, dwell, and a softer feel, go with the 16mm. Either way, these are two of Joola's better releases in terms of feel and playability. Let me know in the comments which one you would choose and why. All right, moving on to the paddle of the week. And next, the paddle of the week is the Tecnifibre TF Select 15mm. You're probably going, huh? This is the paddle that I've enjoyed playing more this week. And honestly, it was a complete shock to me. It was almost a super close tie with the Gearbox GX2 paddles that are well up there, but I've got to give the edge to the TF Select this time. What stood out most was how confident I felt playing with it. It's not just that it felt good, but it felt like I could attack more often, especially on balls that I couldn't attack with other paddles for fear of launching an outball. Shots that I might have hesitated on with another paddle, I felt more comfortable going after with the TF Select. And for me, that confidence is a huge part of why it earns the top spot. This is an all-court paddle that leans slightly, and I do mean slightly, towards the control side, but it definitely does not lack power. It plays plush and smooth thanks to Tecnifibre's T-Feel technology, but it doesn't feel soft or dull. There's enough firmness to stay connected and enough softness to absorb impact. It reminds me a lot of the Pickleball Apes Pulse series. Maybe just a little tighter in feel, but in the best way. The power profile is measured and easy to control. Serves collect in at 55.5 miles per hour in the 53rd percentile, and punch volleys at 35.5 miles per hour in the 32nd percentile. It's not overpowering, but it's consistent. When I took a full swing, it delivered, and when I needed to dial it back for resets or touch shots, it didn't feel jumpy or unpredictable. Spin came in at 2,165 RPM in the 41st percentile, and it feels reliable. The coarse peel ply surface gives enough bite to shape shots along with dwell and keeps balls dipping. It's not the craziest spin I've seen, but it's dependable and easy to use for controlled shape shots. The balance feels great too. The static weight is 8.18 ounces, and the swing weight is 116.5, giving it a nice, agile feel in hand. The 23.4 centimeter balance point keeps it quick and responsive, especially during fast hand exchanges. It just felt easy to move and consistent to play with, which is why it stayed in my bag all week. The sweet spot is solid but not massive. The twist weight is 6.75 in the 65th percentile, so it holds up well in clean hits, but it's not ultra forgiving if you're consistently catching balls off center. But for me, it wasn't an issue once I adapted. The TF Select 15mm retails for $189, and unfortunately, I can't help you save some money on the purchase because I don't even have an affiliate code set up. Final thoughts. It's comfortable, very consistent, and gave me the confidence to attack more and feel good about my game. I'm sure you've all had that feeling like you just can't miss. Well, for whatever reason, that was my experience playing with the TF Select this week. For me, that's what made it stand out, and that's why it's my paddle of the week. All right, that's a wrap for episode 4 of Paddle of the Week. As always, these are just my early impressions and some more educated impressions. Some paddles will stay in the rotation, some will move on, and a few will get a deeper dive in future reviews. If there's a paddle I've covered today that caught your attention, let me know about it in the comments. Or if there's a paddle you're curious about that I haven't featured yet, drop that down there too. Your input helps shape what I test and review next. And if you're thinking about picking up any of the paddles I mentioned today, check the links in the description. Some include discount codes, and when you use those, it helps support the channel. Plus, it keeps me testing and reviewing more gear. Thanks for tuning in, and if you're enjoying the series, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes just like this one. I'll be back next week with more paddles and more insights. Thanks again for watching.